Hey guys, Chloe here. Today we're going to be talking about everything I hate about UChicago. Now I know you want to get started right away, and usually so do I, but I just wanted to put a really short little disclaimer here. My experience at UChicago is just by definition my experience. Everything that I see, people I interact with, the school in my eyes are going to be only like focusing on one facet or two facets, and people, and as well as the institution, is multidimensional. So I just wanted to remind everybody that even though my opinion is not representative at all of UChicago as a whole, but it's still valid and it is still my experience and my opinion. So yeah, let's just keep that in mind and let's go ahead and get started. I have a long list of just like everything I want to, you can't see the screen, but it's a bunch of stuff. The first one is, even though UChicago has a really strong sense of school spirit and community and solidarity as a school, I do feel that specific communities within UChicago are quite isolated and distanced from each other. For example, if I would take just like a handful of students from UChicago's campus, and then I take another handful of students from some other college campus, you'll find a lot more people at UChicago are going to be either in the same major or have like similar career interests or have same academic interests, and that's not a problem at all. But UChicago doesn't have that solid like community that you as an individual can rely on before you start making, your own like group of friends. So for example, I know UChicago publicizes their houses, our houses, a lot. In every dorm you have a couple of houses, and when you go in there, you're assigned to one. I think maybe 80 people are in one house, but there really isn't any sense of house culture that you immediately feel when you go into these houses. There are some people who, participate in house activities. They, become like RAs, and that's amazing, but the majority, like vast majority of people I know are not involved in house activities beyond maybe the first like month or so. There just really isn't that kind of tie between your house and yourself. And I really don't like that about UChicago, because school at UChicago and schooling is quite stressful. And yes, you're having fun during orientation week, probably with friends at your house, but then you kind of move away from them when classes actually begin, and then you have to start the process of like finding your own friends, and it's often quite difficult to just kind of feel at home. So it's not really the institution's fault, but like for example, Yale's individual residential colleges, I think you're in there for all 4 years too. I don't think you can change it. But for UChicago, you can change it basically whenever you like. And more importantly, each house doesn't really have its own like identity or its own like personality or its own like fun activities, and it's more provided as a resource for you to reach out to rather than like a friend, that you can rely on. My little spiel on this is honestly just, I don't feel very connected with people outside of my major or just like having similar academic interests. Even though I do take classes like the core in many different fields, you very rarely, just face it, like you almost never make friends from class. There are some exceptions, but usually it's because, we see each other at a party or we see each other at some other event and we're like, oh, we have two things in common, we can try reaching out to each other, something along those lines. And so it's just very difficult to break out of your little bubble. And if you're a UChicago freshman watching this, or incoming freshman, I would just suggest you to try to move out of your bubble early on, especially because that's when you start making friends and being connected to each other. I've been really fortunate in that in some ways because of YouTube, I do get to meet a lot of people that I feel like I wouldn't usually meet, but obviously that's not the case for everybody, so reach out, don't be afraid, everyone's in the same boat as you are. Next thing I don't like about UChicago. The next thing is honestly a bit of an academic class thing. So obviously we've all heard about UChicago and grade deflation, right? How UChicago will curve down your grades to like a C or a B minus or something along those lines. Now that isn't true anymore. UChicago as an institution does not grade deflate your GPA, like I can say that very confidently. If you get an A at UChicago, it is an A at other schools. You do not become a B just because you go to UChicago. However, that being said, specific classes and professors in specific departments such as econ and stats will curve your classes quite harshly. I know for a fact that some econ classes will designate like the top 10% of the class or so to get an A, and you might think like, oh, 10% isn't that many. But when you consider the fact that this class is already a lot more difficult than what you would typically expect for a first year in college or second year in college, and you have so many people, econ is one of the most popular majors at UChicago, you have so many people taking these classes, and you are like artificially defining people's grades as A just because they compete in a certain way within a certain group of people. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But full disclosure, part of this is because I do wish that I had better grades, because I have been many a situation where I am doing the same amount of work as some of my friends. We get tested on vastly different things, but I'll talk about that more in like the next point. And somehow we end up with, again, like different grades. Of course, this can be attributed to like I didn't study hard enough, they studied more, they're maybe more naturally inclined towards some subject, all of that stuff. But the TLDR is this is a big problem when it's applied to core classes. And this is kind of like my fourth point transitioning in, which is difficulty of classes really vary at UChicago, especially for core, when everyone is required to take certain classes, right? So I heard this terrible story when I was in first year. So obviously I didn't take 151 because I skipped 151, and that's a math class that you had to take, so you had to take a math sequence at UChicago, but you can skip it if you've taken like AP Calc BC and gotten a 5, or if you do like a math accreditation test, just to give you guys that knowledge. I've heard of this 151 class that was teaching straight up like 153, 161 knowledge in the first week and was going at a very insane pace. And I remember hearing from my friends that the class started out with like 21 people or something, and then had dropped to like 10 people in the next week. And that's just sad because sometimes the difference isn't that obvious, right? Sometimes you go to class, I go to class, and I'll learn it, I'll do the homework, and then I'll compare my like amount of homework with my friends, and then I'll think to myself, why didn't I switch a section? It's the exact same course, it's just taught by a different teacher, and ultimately our grades are going to be different because the final exam, the midterm exams are also, you know, specific to each professor. So I'm not saying that every professor needs to stick to a specific curriculum. I fully think that they should just teach however they like. But I do think that it would be nice if you kind of standardized the finals and midterms at least a little bit to make them on the same wavelength. And so no matter, you know, what pace you want to go at or what materials you want to teach as like extra bonus material, at least core students can get a similar like gauge on their grading. It's just, I hate that. Like it just doesn't make any sense to me. The next one is a bit of like how UChicago's culture is sometimes very reactionary. And I'm talking about UChicago students, not really the school as a whole. For students, you really are somewhere among like a spectrum. You have on one end the stereotype, which is, you know, you don't care about the difficulty of classes, you're going to take the most difficult class regardless of how shitty your GPA might become. You don't care about career prospects, being professional, you think that's, you know, very superficial because you're not here for like how it will be applied in real life, but rather here for like the theoretical parts of it, right? So that's one end of UChicago, the like stereotype that has kind of evolved from the 80s, 90s, and has stayed. And then on the other hand, you have a brand new type of student that's emerged as a response to that, which involves being super career oriented, very pre-professional, has like all your internships planned out for the next 2 years, takes classes and games the system just to get good grades, you know, finds out specific professors, it gets the tea, and like slides into like upperclassmen DMs in order to like get like information, you know, tries to get into all the super competitive clubs. And now on both of these ends, it seems really odd to be a student here because when you meet people, you always subconsciously feel like they're gonna judge you based on what kind of answer you give them. So for example, my first year when I said I was taking Hume, Soc, Bio, and Math, and I remember people would be like, oh, you're taking Hume and Soc together, you know what social are you taking? And I would say Power, and they'll be like, oh my god, that's such a difficult class, you're taking Hume and Soc together, you must be really confident in your like reading, writing ability, or you must, you know, not really care about your GPA. And the fact is, I picked the classes because I liked them. But I was also very cognizant about my GPA. So of course I did research into the different professors and picked the professor that had the best reviews in terms of support that they gave and also just how they grade. Like, I feel like that's something that should be normalized and not just seen as something that's very, like, you're not in it for the life of the mind, you know, that doesn't matter, it's about the pure liberal arts education. I mean, yes it is, but also at the same time we just need to acknowledge that, you know, the world has become more pre-professional. And so have colleges, and that's entirely fine, especially in this economy. But yet on the other hand, I also meet, as an econ major, I meet a lot of finance students who are interested in finance. And then they have like, oh, well, you know, what are you doing this summer? And that means, where are you doing your internship? And it's like, oh, did you go to the info session last night? What are you wearing? You know, are you dressing up as business casual? Are you dressing up as like formal? How many business cards did you get? Which is an actual question I've gotten at info sessions. I just feel like people at UChicago need to chill a little bit and don't worry as much about being in one of the two or feeling like you have to reject or push away from one view than the other. I just feel like pick and choose, you know? If you're more pre-professional, then go for it. You don't have to bash other people for it. You don't have to judge other people for not doing that right now. And what usually happens, in my experience, the most successful pre-professional career people, like alumni, during undergrad were very just, you know, they took whatever class they liked. they didn't really care about career prospects. However, when the opportunity arose or when they found something they wanted to do, they pursued it at full force. And I feel like that's the point of UChicago, which is teaching you how to do whatever it is that you want really, really well. And that's it. That's my little spiel. All right, the next 3 things that I want to talk about are a bit more nuanced. And these are more just feelings that I have about UChicago that I really don't like, and it's really difficult for me to communicate that with people. The first one is what I call dismissive listening. Now, I got the term dismissive listening from this Instagram post about actually Black Lives Matter, but they were talking about like invalidating other people's experiences because they didn't reach the same threshold or didn't experience the same things that you did or you think most people do. And I feel like that's a perfect phrase to describe UChicago sometimes. So I wrote out this little like conversation that I hear a lot and have a lot at UChicago.
Oh my god, I'm so swamped this week. It's 5th week and the weather is terrible and I have so much work to do.
Oh really? Like me too. What work do you have to do?
I have like 4 PSATs, 2 projects, I have a midterm tomorrow.
Oh, me too. I have 6 PSATs, I have like 3 essays, I have to do this like volunteer work for this like NGO that I've started working on, and I'm also working with like 3 other people on this new competition. That's fine. Sometimes you just want to hear other people's experiences and know that we are all stressed and in the same boat during finals week and midterms week, because we are. However, when this is applied to things that are not purely academics or even just also academics, but sometimes a bit more extreme, you're not really listening to people's problems. You're more listening to them, comparing it to your own, and then telling them that it's either 1, okay, you don't have to feel that stress because I'm doing more work than you and I'm not that stressed, or 2, oh yeah, no, you should feel that stress because you're doing so much work. But the bottom line, the TLDR, is you shouldn't be judging whether someone can or cannot feel stressed based on how much work they're doing. And this applies to yourself too, right? Don't think, I can't feel stressed because I'm only taking 4 classes, but there are people taking 5 classes. Like that's stupid. Don't do that. The point I wanted to address is sometimes at UChicago, mental health is a really tough thing to talk about because everyone is stressed, but it's more about how we deal with that in our everyday conversations. UChicago has a pretty good support for, if you're struggling with mental health, you have any sort of problems. There are therapists, there are student on call, and I know a couple friends who've used them before, and I've heard very positive reviews. But for example, here's another conversation.
Yeah, today's a bad day for me. I just haven't been feeling great.
Why? What's up?
Yeah, I just don't feel great today. It's just not a good day for me.
Oh yeah, no, I totally feel you. I have 3 PSATs, 4 essays, 2 midterms, 5 projects I'm working on, all of that. Having that kind of response to people's troubles really isn't helping the situation. It's sometimes more just about listening to people and saying, yes, I feel you. You don't have to provide a reason for that. That's it. That's my whole spiel. Okay, I'm done ranting. All right, next point that I hate about UChicago. Everyone has heard of the phrase, don't go beyond 62nd. Specifically, don't go south beyond 62nd. And that's a street, by the way. UChicago is located on the south side of Chicago. I'm not gonna say that this is a safe neighborhood. It's not. If you come from a place that has a lot more security, that, doesn't allow guns. So like I grew up in Shanghai and I'm from Singapore. Both of these places, in my opinion, are very, very safe and low crime rate. So when I came to Chicago, and specifically UChicago, I definitely felt more alert than I was. And that's fine. Now the problem is, and I know some of you feel this as international students, either our parents or some group chats or some people trying to give us good advice will tell you, if you see a black person on the streets when you're walking on the south side, be extra vigilant. And something about that just doesn't sit right with me. It's not about acknowledging that we are not in a very safe neighborhood, because we all do that. It's about acknowledging that how dangerous a neighborhood is specifically because its people are a certain race and not just socioeconomically or just because of gentrification. I mean, there's always that, there's really famous incident, and I don't know if you guys want me to talk about it more, but essentially someone robbed the GameStop, drove into UChicago, dashed into the economics building, and then hid there or something, and everyone around me when that was going on, because we were all on campus and there were cop cars everywhere, immediately assumed that the person was black. I'm not saying that UChicago is a very safe neighborhood, because you do need to be careful, especially if you're female, minority, walking around at night. You do need to be vigilant of your surroundings just as you would in any other place in the US. But if you're walking in a predominantly black, socioeconomically underdeveloped region, and you specifically are more on the lookout for black people than other races, you're being racist. Giving that advice to people is being racist. And I don't want to create this cycle where people are either, you know, like actively not being alert because they want to avoid being racist, or they're being hyper alert and therefore are being racist, right? Like it's a big cycle. It's a problem that I think we just, you know, as same as any other university that's located in an area that's just not super rich and safe. The TLDR is just, we need to start chipping away at this negative association. But all things aside, if you go beyond 60 seconds during the day, you're with your friends, it's entirely safe. Nothing's going to happen. Just be alert as you usually would and you'll be fine. It's not a reason to not explore Chicago or not explore the south side of Chicago because you are in this neighborhood. You probably came here partially because of the city and the diversity. Embrace it. Alright, the last thing I want to talk about is kind of odd because it's not something I hate, it's just something I've noticed and I really don't like. Sometimes when you're having a conversation about topic A, people will bring up the same topic but from a different perspective under the guise of being a devil's advocate. And there's always that kid at UChicago, if you go to UChicago you know what I'm talking about, that kid in discussions, in class, in just like chilling on the quad in the library, who really wants to provide an extra opinion. That's 100% okay. I think, especially within an academic setting, that should be praised and should be encouraged. However, sometimes when you're talking about issues and you want to hear people's opinion on the issue, not from like another perspective, we should honor that. This particular thing I have a problem with came from this one conversation I was having with my friend on the first floor of the reg. So we were talking, this was like a while back, we were talking about how President Bolsonaro of Brazil, his two main economic advisors, I think, are both UChicago alums. And we were talking about how questionable his policies were and, you know, how we're glad that that's not something that people are associating with UChicago, hopefully. And, you know, that's not something that we're being taught at UChicago because, like, you know, as econ majors, people are always like, UChicago is where Milton Friedman graduated from, therefore you must think blank. Stupid. But some guy turned around and was like, but you know, and I'm just playing the devil's advocate here, but thinking from this perspective, I actually think this. And I was just sitting there like, yes, I appreciate your opinion and that's absolutely valid and your perspective is great. But right now we're just talking about within the scope, this specific topic. And that's it. Sometimes people say what they don't believe in or things they don't really believe because they want to push things and, you know, try to come up with something better, and I think that's the whole point of UChicago. That's one thing I really love about UChicago. But sometimes we just have to have conversations about specific issues without reverting to other perspectives in order to seem more knowledgeable or more open-minded. Because I think, hopefully, most people you meet at UChicago are going to be very open-minded and, you know, like will indulge you in other experiences and all of these like different hypotheticals. But sometimes you need to have the important conversations. And yeah, that's basically it. I did cut out a couple of like small things from this list that I think other people would probably hate, but not me. Like for example, the weather. The weather is very cold here. It is very, very, very cold. I've been to Boston in the dead of the winter. I've been to New York. I have not been to like Utah or Maine, but Chicago is so windy and so icy and it's just incredibly cold. But I personally don't really mind because I like the four seasons and UChicago in the spring is wonderful, even though it is true that most of the time the campus is pretty depressing because everything's just white and wet. But yeah, hope this was somewhat helpful for you guys. I didn't want this to be too much of a rant, but I feel like at some points it did become a rant. If you have any just like questions, differing opinions on anything I said, go ahead and comment them down below. Completely welcome here on this channel. And yeah, I just wanted to get this video up alongside the everything I love about UChicago to give you guys a better sense of my personal experience at this university. That's it for me. So the next video is everything I love about UChicago, and if you want like a full image of what my experience at UChicago is currently like, please also go watch that video. You can't just watch one because I feel like then your perspective might be a bit skewed, and I really don't want to like scare anyone away from UChicago because it really is a really cool place in so many different ways. It's just these are the things that I have issues with. So yeah, I'll see you guys like right in the next video.